So it begins with a good act of journalism, and just to steal a little something from the end, it ends with a good act of journalism, of narrative journalism. In between, though, yeah, they miss every story. But here was the meta part. This is the part I ruined when I was telling the story. In reality, the Baltimore Sun missed and never reported on the fact that Martin O'Malley, when he was running for governor for 3 years, consistently had his police commanders hide the stats, reduce crime, cheat the crime. The commander of the Southwest District made robberies go down 80%. It was such a feat of police work that they made him chief of detectives. When the next guy came in to be commander of the Southwest District, robberies went back up 80%. He's an honest guy. Then they started yelling at him in the ComStat meetings, for losing control of his district. Martin O'Malley made the third grade test scores go up by cheating it and by teaching the test, having the teachers teach the test, as you saw in season 4. That game was completely wiped out in the fifth grade. You saw the Baltimore Sun trumpet the third grade test scores and failed to look with any depth at what No Child Left Behind was doing in the schools. There were a certain number of political prosecutions that were the result of some similar dynamics, not exactly the same, but similar dynamics between the U.S. Attorney and the State's Attorney's Office and the city and feds, as we played in the season. Never ended up in the Baltimore Sun. How is it that a TV show, a television drama, I mean, all you had to do was go to any bar with any cop over the rank of sergeant, at any, and buy him 2 beers, and you were writing on cocktail napkins the shit that they were doing to hide the crime. Because a lot of the cops were disgusted. This is all to get Martin O'Malley elected governor. Never got into the paper. You could go to any school teacher and ask about teaching, you're teaching the test answers? Yeah, as best we can, as fast as we can. Never got in the paper. There were drug wars fought. Guys like Prop Joe were killed. It used to be, sometimes the Sun would miss him, sometimes they would find him. They were you never even see it in the briefs column. I'd hear about it from, a guy would call me from prison, a guy that I know, would call me and say, collect call, did you hear Toke got killed? When? I didn't see it in the paper. It's like, it was in the prison grapevine. They knew about it in Jessup, but the Baltimore Sun didn't know. So that is the meta moment, which is everything that happened in the critique is indicative of how thin that newspaper is now because of what Chicago and out-of-town ownership did. And we put it in the television show, or at least we put a facsimile of it in a television show. Now, admittedly, we don't have the same rigor of reporting. We can run a mile on a rumor, but, the truth is it was all true. And if you watch The Wire, you got a hint at it. But you should never have to watch a television drama to get a hint at what, that there's something absurd about that. But that was the twist of that. So.
David, would you like to take maybe one more question? Because,
I feel like if they're standing, let's just, I'll go faster.
You just answered my question, so thank you for The Wire. Hi.
Killed you, huh? Had just about enough.
I was wondering, I read your Esquire article on impact journalism. It was Esquire.
Yeah.
I think, on impact journalism, right? I'm thinking a lot about the portrayals of the reformists in The Wire, people who try to reform the system, right? And I'm wondering if you see any connection at all between sort of the idea of impact journalism, right, like covering homeless in the way they do, right, and the idea of reform.
No, there's no connection.
Okay.
Only the most minor connection, which is if you find somebody who's got his hand in the till and you catch him, you say, gotcha. You've reformed it to the extent that one guy who was stealing, or one guy who was a thug, or one guy who was an asshole had his hand slapped. Congratulations. Let me tell you what impact journalism was in Baltimore. And this was the gospel according to John Carroll and Bill Marimo, and it's what they learned in Philly. It's what Gene Roberts perfected. It's what Carroll brought here to the LA Times, and and it will not fail to win a Pulitzer every now and then, and certainly with more frequency than not doing it. It certainly will be rewarded. But I'll give you 2 examples of the inherent dishonesty in narrowing your focus. I was on the street reporting the corner when welfare reform came in under Clinton. It was really dramatic. Everything was being tossed this way and that. State social workers were trying to figure out what the hell is going on. This program is no longer funded. This loan program is in its place, but we only have this. It was crazy. And the Baltimore Sun assigned reporters to look at the SSI program, which is Social Security Disability, just to look at that and to report about how there were lots of guys getting SSI checks who weren't really disabled. There was fraud. God damn it, there was fraud. And we got guys who were walking around on two good legs and they got an SSI check. Meanwhile, up at Rosemont, at the Social Security office, state social workers are making every one of their clients fill out SSI applications and saying you're going to get turned down once, twice. It was the only program still standing for a certain category of adult males. So the state people, having everything defunded in this reform, we're hurling people into SSI as a tactic. Utterly, did the Baltimore Sun ever go and look at what happened with welfare reform on the streets of its city? No, they did the gotcha about the guys in SSI. Now, here's the pontification according to a guy like Carroll, which is, well, there's nothing to say a newspaper can't do both. You can look at the big and you can look at, you do this, except they never did the one. They just did the one that could win them a prize. Second story. They had the guy who was making stuff up at the Baltimore Sun, one of his big projects was lead paint poisoning. He did a ton of articles on lead paint poisoning, January to December only because, keep it in that calendar year for the Pulitzer. And he was passionate about lead paint poisoning. And it got to the point where he actually started making the argument based on some real spurious logic that the reason for the city violence, the reason for the level of violence in the inner city was that the kids perpetrating it were all lead paint poisoning. If you could stop lead paint poisoning, you could, this whole drug violence thing would go away because the kids would not be, functionally lead paint poisoned. And this bordered, if it didn't cross the line to actual racism, it certainly bordered on it. To ignore the fact that these kids are product of a disaster of the school system, of broken homes, of environments where the only viable economic engine was the drug trade. To overlook all of that, to overlook the entire schematic of their lives and focus on this one thing. First of all, of course, more of the kids who are involved in the drug violence in the inner city are lead paint poisoned or have residue of lead in their bodies. Where else is there lead paint? Where else are, it's like, that defines that notion of, God damn it, if I'm myopic enough, if I exclude everything, if I hammer the shit out of this, if I keep writing stories so that the governor will schedule some hearings, and then I can say the governor schedules some, and maybe if they pass a law, and I can send, I'm just a bad law away from the public service Pulitzer. And that was the journalism of John Carroll and Beryl Marimo. And I don't doubt that they, I haven't looked at what John did here at the LA Times. I'm sure there's some good journalism in there. I'm sure there are a lot of people who think he's a wonderful man. I'm sure, he certainly looks the part. But I watched it close up. I'm sorry, I watched it close up and it was inherently dishonest. And it was wearying because the world is more complex than that. And, to dismiss these profound forces that are at work on the Dukies and the Randys and everybody else in the world as being, well, if they just kept the lead paint out of their blood, they'd be fine. They'd all be, fucking pre-law. I mean, it was incredible. It was, yeah. Oh, and by the way, the fabulist at the Baltimore Sun, the guy doing lead paint poisonings, there were several stories that were retracted in full. Retracted, I don't mean corrections, I mean the premise of the stories were retracted. But the one where I finally decided I'm never going to not use their name in public, that I'm always going to speak to this publicly. I'm going to own my past as a guy who loved the Sun, who worked there, and was just sick to death at what became of the place,